so we're going to balance our engines. I threw that together, probably in the wrong spot. Balance ½ ounce or less between opposite sides for rods and ½ ounce or less for pistons. That was according to TCM. I don't have anything for Lycoming, but I would stick to that standard. So Lycoming, they're weird here. Lycoming uses rods that are A, B, C, S, D, and E. Or I guess we could say A, B, C, D, E, and S would have made a lot more sense because it's the same thing. All right, so A is the lightest. How light? I don't know. It's the lightest. So they take all these rods, they put them together, and they lump them. If it's a light one, they're going to stamp it with an A. The E is the heaviest.
That's why the S is.
And the S is service. S equals service. So what does that mean? Well, if you have an engine and you have a rod failure, and you look at the opposite side and it's stamped with an A, you'll get a A. If it's stamped with a B, you get a B. And those numbers don't last forever. They're kind of ink stamped on there. But if you look at the other side and you don't know what it is, then you get a S. You got it. Okay. Both Lycoming and Continental, I don't have this in my notes, have recently had some significant problems with their piston pin bushings. So let me tell you about putting these piston pin bushings in there. Lycomings are a son of a gun. So Lycoming piston pin bushings are pretty thin, and they're split. So it's, you know, a circle with a split down the middle. And you press them in, and it's not a real hard press to get them in. But then you broach them. And I can't even find a picture of a broach. I had one. I had several of them. It's a little pin. Maybe it has a little spider on it. No. But it's called a broach. And I could try and draw it. And in my mind, it'll make sense. But imagine the pin as a broach. It's a cylinder, a little bit longer than my pin is, and obviously about the same thickness about is a piston pin. And going down the length of it, it just has these little humps as it goes down. And apparently each one of those is a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. Actually, if you really looked at it, it would be they're kind of square at the end. And a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. And of course, on one end, it's going to have, I'm only drawing half of it, a pilot, you know, and you start it in. And so you got these little rings that go all the way down. And that's terrible drawing. But anyway, you push this through, and what it is each one of those little bumps swells it a little bit more. And so you force this through, and it displaces the metal and just smashes it the hell in there. All right, so then you do that. You smash it in with this broach. And I didn't have a hydraulic press, but I had a press with an arm about that long. And, you know, I would always make sure I was feeling real good and healthy and drank a lot of water the day I was going to broach 6 of these. Because, man, it is just, I'm hanging off that thing. And I'm exhausted by the time I did 6 of them. It was a lot of work pushing that broach through. Then you line bore them. So we had a line boring machine. It was the sweetest. It was called a Tobin arc. The sweetest thing ever. It had a single fly cutter. It just means it had one little cutter on there. And so we would set them up in this fixture. I don't even know where they got this machine, but it was just incredible. And what it would do is we would hold the big end and use magnifying glasses and actually read the numbers and set the height. And we'd set the deck height to the exact what it should be. And when this cutter went through, it didn't matter if there was twist and convergence because that cutter went through straight. And so when you were done, this was straight to this. I mean, guaranteed 100% to exact accuracy of what Lycoming or Continental wanted for height. It was wonderful. Continental is a little bit different. Their bushings were a lot fatter. They were difficult to get in because they just wanted to always roll metal. And if you rolled metal, you screwed it up. But anyway, you would just push the bushing in and then... Wait, you have a question?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So the broach, right? So like you said, it gets bigger as it goes inside.
Yeah.
So as you're pushing it in, it's obviously moving it out. But
Yeah.
isn't there as you're obviously you're forcing it down, so wouldn't it be also kind of pushing it out the back?
You had to
at the same
protect the
time?
bottom. You had to,
Okay.
and there. So yeah, you didn't have room for it to push down through.
Yeah.
We had a plate that held it.
Kind of block it in.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good question. So Continental, yeah, you just push the bushing in. It was very, very tight to get in. Unlike light combing. Light combing, the bushing went in, boop, like, butter. But then you broached it. Continentals went in real stiff, and then you cut it to size. And they had a lot more meat to them, and they were easier to cut. But, yeah, light combing had a real problem not that long ago where they had to take apart a whole bunch of engines across the United States, and they had this special tool where you would put it where the piston pin goes. I don't have a picture of it. And it had a spring on it. You would have to put so much pressure on the spring, and it would see if it would push the bushing out the other side. And if it pushed the bushing out the other side, then it was bad. And I'm thinking, and having done this, there's absolutely no way that could happen unless it wasn't broached in place. Now, nowhere does it talk about what happened, and I would say that there's only a small handful of people in the world at this point who've ever actually put a con rod together like that. So they don't know what the process is. You just kind of go, oh, they put the bushing in, you must cut it. You got to broach it. So they didn't broach it. That's just me. I'm telling you, they didn't broach it. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's my opinion, and I'm proud of it. Continental, they've got a problem where pieces of theirs just fall apart. I was looking the other day, and there was it kind of caught me by surprise. There was a service bolt, and then, I'd been out of the industry doing this for a while. Now I'd have Meyer plane, and so I'm, kind of looking at some Continental stuff. I'm like, whoa, this service bolt was reissued with some amendments that I had missed. But whenever you change oil in a Continental, you're supposed to drain it into I forget, so many micron screen before it goes into your waste bucket. They're looking for parts that will go out the hole. So there's basically, it's pieces of connecting rod fall off, go out of the sump, come out of the drain tube, and then they fall in your bucket and you don't notice it. So they want you to catch everything and visually look at what goes through a screen. So it was interesting because the screen they wanted you to buy was insane. It was like $700. And I'm thinking, there's gotta, and so I went on Amazon and I typed, whatever micron screen it was, and I found one for cooking that was only, like $40. And you can do that because it says this micron, screen. It didn't even say or equivalent. Like, you can use this one if you want. So it was an or equivalent. So as long as that screen. So yeah, they've had some issues with some connecting rod bushings, definitely. What's that?
Apparently it was food grade. Apparently it was food grade, so that's.
Yeah. So connecting rods are usually an H or I beam. So I guess if you hold it this way, it's an I beam. If you hold it this way, it's an H beam. That's all I can figure out. I don't know. That's the way it looks to me. Let's talk about and in connecting rods, in the industry, we just say big end, small end. It's easier to say than, piston pin end or the, crankshaft. It's big end, small end. So we'll talk about the large end or big end. Large end, what do I have to say about that? Connects to the crank, obviously. Connects to crank. This will come as a shock. It is stamped with cylinder number on both the cap and the rod. You guys have them all fancy and you're all worried about what spot they came out of. Stamp right there. This came off of number 1. All right. I don't want to write that. I'll tell you that the number is installed away from the camshaft. I say that because light combing, the camshaft is up here, and they want the numbers down. Light combing says put the numbers facing down. Continental, the cam is here, and they say install the numbers going up. So it goes that way. So it's easier for me to say one engine the other, numbers go away from the cam. I can remember that, always. It's going to be tricky use your head when you put them together. When you're building your engine, you may want to put them together and just have them barely started or hand tight before you torque it and ask me to check it, because you'll be surprised how difficult it is to get the numbers going the right way. It's funny because some people, the numbers have to go down and you have to line them up. So it's like the 1 is going to go this way and the 2 is going to go that way and the 3 is going to go this way and the 4 is going to go that way. But I'll get to your engine and you'll have them all. It's just funny. You'll see. So I'm just warning you now. Make sure it's right. Let's see. Some of the, and this is what I wrote here. Some rods, the number means nothing. Well, it doesn't really mean anything. It means something. It means that's a matched pair, and they went together, and the 1 went to the 1, and this was in the 1 spot. So I don't want to say it means nothing. But I could take a look at this rod, and it's very symmetrical. Well, it was when it was new. But otherwise, it's a very symmetrical rod. And honestly, I don't believe it. If it came without a numbered stamp on it, like if you had to order a brand new one and it didn't have a stamp, it can go any which way it wants. But not all engines are that way. It has an oil hole drilled here that has to aim at a very specific spot. And it's aiming like at that cylinder over there. So if I aimed it over here and it was the number 1 and there's nothing over there, it's not going to oil this piston over here. So it's very critical that you get it going the right way. So I'll just put some rods, that's what I'll do. Some rods must be installed so that oil squirter sprays cylinder, opposite cylinder. There you go, opposite cylinder. A lot of you guys, I have to tell you, I'm very impressed with you guys as a class. Either I'm just getting really good as a teacher, or I'm getting, I don't care, but you guys seem to be doing a really good job, and you're asking a lot of really good questions. And it's so much stuff that I haven't really said to you that I just don't need to, because you guys just instinctively pick up on stuff. You come to me like, okay, I can't get this bolt in. Can I use a hammer? I've had a lot of other classes. They're just beating it against, they just walk up to that metal pole and just like, gotta go in somehow. And you guys all ask questions. So yes, these are somewhat of a tap fit, which would mean it's also an interference fit. And that's because without that bolt being an interference fit, if it was a loose bolt, then this cap would slide back and forth. And it wouldn't, if it's off by 1/8 of an inch, so that's going to make a big difference when it starts running, right? So yes, they are a tap fit because they're lining up these caps. I don't think I have this in the notes anywhere. All right, so I told you guys about how they used to have cotter pins and now they don't. And Lycoming or Continental now uses this spiral lock kind of weird one, and you're not supposed to reuse these. Lycoming has in their higher horsepower engines, they don't have torque bolts; they have stretch bolts. And we've talked about this, I think, about how torquing, the act of torquing something. Torque means, of course, to twist. And like if I'm going to say, I want the torque on this to be 480 inch-pounds, nobody gives a crap about this. That means absolutely nothing. What somebody has figured out is that with a properly oiled nut, using the correct oil, twisted at a rate, twisted at 480 inch-pounds, given this thread and the friction, that means that it is pulling this bolt at an X number of pounds. That's what you really want, is that stretch, right? Did we talk about this? Yes. Okay, so if you don't have the stretch or the preload, then what happens is if the stress on this stretches the bolt, because the stress here is more than the stress on the bolt, then the bolt will expand and contract, and then it eventually just fatigues and breaks. So this has to be stretched tighter than whatever this is. Well, on the higher horsepower upper end Lycoming engines, you're actually, all of the bolts are machined, both sides, and it's been a while since I've done it, but you use a torque wrench because you can't exceed a certain torque, but you use a micrometer. And you tighten it till you get a specific stretch using a micrometer, not to exceed a certain torque. And I think the purpose behind the torque is that if there was a problem with the bolt and the bolt was too soft, it catches it that way. Something along that line, but it was kind of just a backup thing. But yeah, so you're sitting there with a micrometer and, and you tighten a little bit, you measure it. Nope, that's not it. Tie a little more, measure it, tie a little more, measure it. There we go. Okay, now we got the right stretch on it using a micrometer. That's how you torque it. Okay, so large end, small end. Small end, hold that, has the piston, pin, bushing. I talked all about the problems there. Obviously, supposed to connect the piston pin to that side. In general, there are 3 basic types of connecting rods. CONNECT, connecting rods. We had the plane for planes. And that's this one that I've been showing you. That's just, and the ones you have, they're plain. So, used on opposed or inline engines. We can say 2-piece. Rod and cap. That's a match set, by the way. You can't just replace a cap or just replace a rod. You got to replace the whole assembly. 2-piece. So it has the pressed bushing on the piston pin, but I already wrote that. Uses bearing on the crank end. That's kind of. Then there's the forked type. I've never used this type or even seen it. Used on V engines. I think I got a picture. Plain type. Oh yeah, look at, there's the newer style Continental nuts. 12 points. That's the one I've been showing you. There you go, your fork type. So it's going to go on the same bearing. Yeah, thank you. Same crank pin. Obviously, each one of these gets its own crank pin. Each one of these gets its own garbage can. Okay. Huh?
Is that a radio?
Yeah.
Do those shuffle around back and
Yeah.
forth?
Yep.
Would they hit each other? Because it looks like it from this image.
No, I'm sure they don't. Otherwise, it wouldn't make it.
Well, no, from this image, it looks like they're like intertwined, like one's wrapping around. the
Yeah,
other.
one is wrapped around. It's fork and one's a blade. So one is like this and one goes in between.
So it's kind of like a wedding ring.
Yeah, but I feel like when
Well,
they
they have
go
the
like
two-
this.
Female wedding ring, two bands and one in the middle.
I literally have a rubber band on my finger. So I don't know what you're talking
Well, I
about.
mean, you
I
purchased the
don't
other
know
one,
what
I
you're
would
talking about.
hope.
What I'm talking about is like, I feel like if it would shift this way, like going side to side, I feel like that like rod would hit the fork.
Well, remember, it's going around like this.
Okay, so they're not shifting like this.
Well, yeah, they're going a little bit. But
I asked if they're shifting like this. You said yes, and
Yeah.
I was confused. And
Yeah,
now
to a
you're saying
point.
this.
And then they're going to go back and forth and do the thing.
Not enough
They don't-
light.
Okay, so it's
Scissors.
stopping just before it hits it.
Yeah, they don't scissor.
Well, no, because like one's inside the other. I don't know if that one's banging into that one the entire time.
Yeah, I guarantee you it's not banging into it.
I hope not. I would assume that would mess it up, but.
Yeah, that's my next note. You don't want to use this because they bang into each other and the engine gets worse. Yeah.
It's like, I want to make sure, alright? It looks like it's intertwined.
I actually, that periscope film I was showing you guys the other day, I think it has that in there.
Yeah, there was one on there that was.
Yeah.
Bald red.
Sorry, I don't have a lot of information to help you on that one. I could look it up and get back to you. This is radial engine. How many cylinders? I'm going to guess 9 just by looking at it.
Yep.
More than 7. All right. So you have a master rod right here. Is that a 1-piece or a 2-piece master rod?
One piece.
No, it's 9-piece. No, it's okay. It's 1 piece. 1 piece. So what does that mean about the crankshaft? Is it a crankshaft, a 1 or 2-piece? 2-piece. Yeah. Okay. So you have the master rod and articulating rods. So it should be 8 articulating rods, 1 master rod.
Yeah, how would you tell? How would you tell on the articulating rods the big end to the small end?
How would I do what?
I have the large end and the small end on the connecting rods. Is there a difference in the dimension of the holes? They
Yeah,
look kinda
yeah.
Similar.
Oh yeah, they look similar. No, they're definitely different size holes. You can't mess it up. They're not that much different, but enough that you would know. So it doesn't take much before you get some slop in there. And you know, these looks like they're bolted in. There's all different kinds. What kind of bearing does a master rod take? Say it again. Plain bearing. It's a Q&A question, if I'm not mistaken. Is it? Yeah. What kind of bearing is that? Plain. What kind of bearing are these? Plain. Okay, there we go. What position does the master rod go to? Which cylinder?
One.
Three.
Got 1. I got 3.
One.
1.
The top one.
Top 1. Which wood number cylinder's top 1? 1. I'm going to say could be anything. Memory is correct, and it could not be. Pretty sure Pratt & Whitney uses the number 1 up and down. It's the 985s. The Continental 220s, also number 1. The Lycoming R680 is number 7. Where do you find this information? The data plate almost always has it.
Oh, yeah.
The data plate written right on the front of the engine. Why is it important?
Because you don't want to put it on the 1 or close to the 7.
Well, we talked about this the other day, remember? Let's see, let's catch up here. Fork, we got master, master and articulating rods. Articulated rod assembly used on radials. Has 1 master rod. Remaining rods are articulated. Articulated. Importance of knowing where master rod is. Master rod is located. All right. Cylinder with the master rod needs to be the last off and first on. Why is that?
This is the one that aligns everything.
Master rod cylinder must be first on and last off. One of the problems you don't have with your particular engine, well, you can kind of, is that, I don't want to explain this. Forget your engine. All right, when you're talking about a radial engine, and if you think about, and by the way, we do have a really cool wooden radial engine kind of thing. I need to get it out. It's kind of hidden behind some stuff. And let me think here. I guess we could just go to that slide. Maybe, hopefully that works. So imagine this all put together. And each one of these has got a piston on it, and the piston is riding inside of its appropriate cylinder. And we'll just say that this one is at top dead center, which makes this one over here at bottom. Okay, some of you guys are really paying attention. Bottom dead center. And so when this particular piston, we'll say right here, comes to bottom dead center, usually radial engines have 4 rings on it, 1, 2, 3, and then one at the skirt, one at the very end. And they run upside down. You have some oil issues, and some are going out right side up. And so when that piston comes down towards bottom dead center, it gets very close to the end of the travel of the piston. So let's say within that far from that ring sliding out, but it doesn't. Okay, so now we've got this engine. We brought that piston all the way down. That ring is that far from coming out of the bottom of the piston, this skirt right here. So it's right about here, right? Dangerously close, but most of the piston's up here. But here's that last ring. Okay, so I take off the master rod cylinder. Now that rod was perfectly in that cylinder, and it could only go this way, right? Okay, but then I take off that cylinder, and it drops down. When it drops down, it takes this entire articulated arm and tweaks it. So I guess I could have used this one down here. So this one right, well, so you know, that's right. So this one right here. So this drops down. What's it going to do to this one right here? It's going to pull it about that far. And you just hear a little tink, if you were listening carefully. That was the ring coming out of the cylinder and expanding. So now that ring is expanded out. But you don't really realize that because, you're working on an engine that's this big around and you're fighting this heavy old cylinder that, weighs 4 times this one. But you go to put that back on and you get the cylinder back on, the piston back on, and you grab the prop to pull it through. This kind of sticks for a second, but it's okay, it'll go. It went because you just shattered the ring all over the inside of the cylinder, inside of the engine. So that's why it's so important that the master rod is the first on so that it's set in its track and the last one off. Now, if I had to replace the cylinder that happened to be the master rod cylinder, I would not have this at top dead center. And I'd be very careful about how I did it. And I would be very careful about listening for a ring that popped out. If it was, that's okay. You pull that cylinder off too. And so you get to pull a lot of cylinders. So that's why that's important. Where am I here? Let me see. First on, last off. Or piston will slip, and lower oil ring will pop out on a different cylinder. Hopefully that made sense. All right. And then I said there may be a 1-piece master rod. Maybe 1 piece. That means then it's used on a 2-piece crank, or it may be 2-piece. In that case, it's usually used on a 1-piece crank. Knuckle pins, not knuckleheads. Knuckle pins. They are used to attach the articulated rods. Those are called knuckle pins. Let's talk about rod nuts and bolts again, really quick. See that machine surface right there? What kind of bolt's that? See that machine surface? That is a
Interference bolt?
stretch bolt.
Stretch bolt.
Stretch bolt. So we're going to torque that to a specific micrometer reading. So that's machined for the micrometer to sit on. See how that one's not? It's got the writing on there. So that one's not. Okay, these nuts. I will get on you, and I think it's really poor taste when you have cylinder-based nuts that you put on upside down. And cylinder-based nuts, and a lot of other nuts, have a little washer kind of built into them that looks a little bit like that. And that's the side that goes to the part. You shouldn't see that. But these rod nuts are the opposite. This is on upside down. This is correct. This is not. So these nuts go different. So don't be this guy. So what else I got? Oh, look at that. There's the scalloped. What do you know? And all kinds of cool pictures. Accessory
Is
case.
there why that the nuts are designed that way?
I'm sure there is. They just didn't ask me. They didn't tell me about it. They should have. Slackers. Okay, let's see. I think I'm out of room, so clear that. There we go.
Rods. Use the articulated rods.
Let's check this. Nope, still don't have my new photos in there. Tomorrow. Took some on my plane today too. All right, rod, bolts, and nuts. What's that? I think it is eye. A big eye, actually. There's that kind of eye.
Okay.
This is a Roman eye. Unless otherwise, stated, rod, bolts, and nuts should be replaced when removed. I'm not going to write all this. It's obviously something I cut and pasted. Anytime connecting rod bolts and nuts are removed, discard both of the connecting rod bolts and nuts, figure 1, and replace them with service use only connecting rod bolts and nuts for the corresponding connecting rod assembly in Table 1 or Table 2, Service Instruction 1458 Golf. 2, nut position is critical. Do not install upside down. So it's flat side toward rod, raise lip up. Raise lip goes up. Service bulletin 240, if I remember correctly, lists mandatory replacement items for light combing. Continental's in their MO manual, but they're absolute replacement parts, and you guys are going to get into this, and you're going to give me a list of stuff you need. These are one of those mandatory replacement items. So mandatory replacement. At overhaul, but even so, I just told you when they're removed, they should be thrown away anyway. Let's see, maybe torqued, 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 or stretched. This is coming out of light combing. I remember this. They said two things a rod cannot handle. I can think of a lot more other things like rejection or lack of oil. We'll file that under the thing. No shit. Oops, I didn't say that on camera. looseness of rod bolts. Use proper lube. I think Lycoming is now using food grade lubricant on these. So pay attention and use the right stuff. What happens if you don't use the proper lube?
40%.
Yeah, you can lose 40% or more. So remember, if you keep remembering, it's not about this. This is not the important thing. It's about the stretch. And if it's dry and crusty and you dropped a little glass bead in there, you're going to get the click, but you didn't get the stretch, right? And what if you use, some super space age, you come in like, look, this is the most slipperiest substance known to man, and I'm going to use this instead. Then what do? Then you over torque it. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about torquing on these specific engines, and it was Lycoming service bolt and this, or Continental says to use this, and the guy's like, you know what? I think this stuff is better, and this is what I use. Okay, better does not mean it right. It makes it right, so not a good thing. All right, section 10. We'll talk about the accessory section. Which is the back, which means I must have talked about everything I need to talk about lower end. That seemed awful easy. I don't know. Hopefully. What's that? We're all the way out to 10. Yeah. So you want me to stop? Yeah. Jeez, stick with me. Accessory case or accessory section. Not all aircraft have accessory cases like this. Even Lycoming for a while uses the integral drive accessory. It was funny, they had the H2AD, and there was a joke. Why would you ever use the words AD in an engine? Airworthiness directive. And the H2AD was an engine they developed. It's supposed to be kind of a lightweight engine with an integral accessory case. And they put them in the Cessna 172s. They were a 150 horsepower engine. And or they called it the 76 series. I don't know where they got that. Maybe it's made in 76. I don't know, but they were a horrifically bad engine. They had so many problems with them and so many service bulletins and ADs. But, eventually they did get it right. They say that that's actually one of the better engines now that they've gone through all of these growing pains. The tappets were too small. So they got spalled. Instead of using rocker arms like you see, they use the car ones that are just stamped steel, and you see you could just throw them away, which that's fine, because rocker arms have their own problems. That is for sure. We'll get into that. The big bore Continentals, 470s, 520s, they don't use an accessory case. It's all integral, all one piece, and it's it all works out fine. But you have your accessory case. So they all have an accessory section, which obviously provides mounting for all various stuff. And what do we have here? We have oil cooler inlets and outlets here. We have an oil screen, or where the filter adapter is going to go. Vacuum pump drive. This right here is your tack shaft. A lot of you guys have forgotten to take your tack shaft out. Magneto pad and magneto pad. This would be cut out for a fuel pump. This would be for a propeller governor. Various different things. What else do I got? There we go. Backside. What is this? Oil pump. I got lots to say about the oil pump. This right here, I should have, hopefully all of yours have it, but there's a pin that goes in here. And that pin, this is where the idler gear goes. And the idler gear has a camshaft, or cam, has a cam on it. And that cam actually rides against a pin, and that pin pushes down on the fuel pump plunger. So we'll talk about that in 312, 313. There we go. There's that little cam I talked about. Tack shaft. This has an integral drive gear. The two-piece camshaft is no longer something Lycoming does at all. Everything they have is a one piece. So there's no more bolts. You don't take this apart. And the bolt back in here is now safety wired. So what do we got going on here? Anything wrong? Got the idler, oil pump drive. Does it matter where these two go? These two idler gears?
Yes.
Only if it's got that cam. If it doesn't have that cam, it does not matter. Just stuff I stole off the internet. Okay. Time to go.